Hello and happy Saturday. I hope everyone's having a good Saturday. Couple of things. First thing, I'm really going to have to change out my spin list. I've had the same CDs on my spin list for a couple of months, and I'm just too lazy to walk into the changing room and swap out the CDs. So easy to do, yet that's what happens when you're depressed. You have things that you can do. I can do so many things that are difficult, but something as simple as walking into the other room and swapping out the CDs, can't seem to do it. Second thing, this is my new lamp. This is so stinking cute, and I have an unhealthy obsession with cute lamps. I'm up to 7. One of them's downstairs. It's a lily. The rest of them are in here. Okay, so getting past all of that, I want to do my final speak as to Thrice, A Peculiar Love Story. I'm not going to be talking about this book anymore after today. Thrice, A Peculiar Love Story. You can buy it on Amazon as a Kindle only, but it's only $3.99 and it's only about 160 pages. So it's not a very long book, and it's not hard to read book, as I've said before. As my final pass on this, I want to talk more about Sebastian and Gemma, who I call the lifers. And then I want to talk more about Graham and Harlow, who I call the late bloomers. So Sebastian and Gemma had met when they were in grade school. He was a 12-year-old, she was a 10-year-old in a math class, and little creative license, I guess, because I don't know how school would have worked way back in the day in Australia, but who cares, because I don't mention it very much. So Sebastian is like in it as a remedial, so he's like put back. They used to have the color groups when I was in 6th and 7th grade, the blue group, the green group. You all knew what they meant. The kids that didn't get it and the kids that were whizzes at it, they didn't want to say those words, the teachers, meaning they didn't want to say those words, but we all knew what the colors meant. Anyway, he was so bad at math that Gemma basically did all his work for him. And they were friends, and then, and the reason I kept them as friends until Gemma turned 18 and found him in Sydney is because this might be an unpopular opinion, but I don't care. I don't think kids that are 12, 13, and 14 are old enough to have sex. So I didn't want to sexualize them and make them romantic until they were adults. So that's the reason I did that. So Sebastian had run away when he was 16, Gemma was 14, and then when she turned 18 and got out of school, she went and found him in Sydney. And they were together through thick and thin for decades. I mean, they just thrived off these little bubbles they would put themselves into. The first bubble was them being essentially homeless or squatting in homes or living in hostels or whatever they called the little shelters, and working day labor. And then Sebastian kind of like had learned how to play the guitar, and he was really had a really brilliant kind of personality, and he liked to sing, so he got into a punk band called the Wombats, which some talent scout had seen them in a show they were playing on Christmas, and there were only like 3 people in the audience because it's Christmas. And this talent scout said, well, if you change everything about your band, including the way you dress, including your subject matter, including your band name, I can get you on MTV, and I can get you a tour in the US, which it turns out to be true, and the band name changed Thrice. And Gemma went along with him, all that touring, all that no doubts, shenanigans that go on with, you know, fancy pants rock star people. He actually never did, they didn't do drugs and they didn't run around with each other. It was none of that. But you can imagine all the things you'd have to see when you're like on tours and hanging out with musicians. And then, but after a couple of years of being the vocalist for the band Thrice, Sebastian got disillusioned of it, quit, resigned, whatever you do. Had an invitation to come audition for a role for some movie, so then he just transitioned from singer to actor. So then Gemma was with him through all of that. And then they ended up splitting up, romantically getting divorced, and got back together like 18 years later as a romantic couple. And I've talked about the reason why they got divorced, what had happened with that. So that's why I call them the lifers. I know that lifers exist. One lifer couple that comes to mind is Robert Smith. I don't know his wife's name because I don't really know much about The Cure. And I don't really care that much about the lives of celebrity types for the most part. But I had seen something in my newsfeed, the Facebook newsfeed. They had been together since in school, and they're still together. So there are lifers. Now, as far as Graham and Harlow, and I call them late bloomers because they didn't get together until he was 55 and she was 49. Well, they didn't know of each other. But Graham had dated people, but never really found the one he wanted to marry. And Harlow had never been married either. She had been in a bad relationship, a really bad one, but it wasn't a marriage. So they get married later in life. And whereas Gemma and Sebastian are just kind of like these bantery, we just want to have a good time kind of people, which is fine. Graham and Harlow, they're like these charitable people. They set up charities. They are really interested in out there trying to make the world a better place, even if it's on a small scale. And that's actually the whole theme of this book. If you can make the world a better place, even if on a small scale, then do it. Try to make somebody's life better. So I'm going to write, speaking of Graham Ferguson, he was the least fleshed out initial. See, when I start to write a book, I'll make a basic outline and then I'll flip the page and then I'll write the characters. Okay, this is going to be this character's name. This is what this character is going to look like. This is going to be their age, personality. And I had an idea of Harlow and Sebastian and Gemma. Gemma kind of evolved a little bit. I made her a little more quippy, I guess, or like, I can't think of the word I'm trying to, I can't come up with it right now. Graham was only a skeleton, so I knew these three things of Graham that I wanted to be true. He had been bullied. I didn't know why for a minute. And then he had a comeback story. I don't know what the comeback story is going to be. And there's some reason he didn't want to father children. I didn't even know what that was. And for some reason, I was watching this movie called Mama. It's about a ghost mother that took care of these two kids that had been abandoned in a cabin in the woods until they got found a few years later, and they were like feral. But one of the kids had been verbal when they were abandoned, and the other one was just a baby. So the one that had the verbal skills was the one that became unferal, where the littler one never became unferal. Because that just speaks as to how important it is to have communication skills. Learn how to talk. That boosts your brain. Then I remembered, and you're seeing how my crazy mind works. I remembered that I had seen a discussion about this movie Mama years ago on IMDb, and somebody was talking about the actor that played the ghost mother, who was actually a man who had something called Marfan syndrome. So I looked that up. And I'm no expert in Marfan syndrome. I'm just going to say that it is hereditary, and it affects your connective tissue, whereas you can be a ticking time bomb in this area. because it's all stretched out. And the reason Graham didn't want to father children is he didn't want to risk passing down this condition because it could be fatal at a very young age. All 4 of my characters had no children for varying reasons, because another thing I wanted to do in this book was to make more normalized of child-free marriages. They exist, y'all. Anyway, I'm going to write another short story called The Boy with the Notebooks about Graham Ferguson, because if any character I've ever written, he's got to be my favorite one. And it's funny because he started off as just this skeleton idea. Just such of a kind and generous person that just needs to exist. Just a lovely human being. And he's very intelligent. But the way he expresses himself sometimes is kind of odd. Like, you could be talking about subject X, and then he'll come and start talking about some other thing that doesn't seem even related at all. But then it turns out he's making one of the best analogies, or it's very relevant what he's talking about. And that's kind of the theme of my books, is they all seem unrelated, but they actually are very much related. They all center in this story, this story arc that the Earth put into play with these certain people that the Earth picked. So let me give you an example of a Grahamism, as I call it. So Gemma and Graham have been talking about Sebastian and Harlow while Sebastian and Harlow were out, like, in the kitchen, like, cooking their dinner. They were going to all 4 of them eat together. And Gemma kind of confesses that she's jealous a little bit of Harlow and Graham, or Harlow and Sebastian, because they've connected in this way that even she and he hadn't connected. They had this bond, like, that she was jealous of it. And it wasn't anything like sexual in between them. It was just more of an emotional kind of bond. And so then, after Graham listens to her make this confession, he just starts talking about his cat. His sister's cat sitting the cat, that the cat really loves the sister. And Jim is just sitting there going, what does this have to do with anything? So then he tells her that he had pets all his life. They were always dogs. And he can speak German. That's an effective language to train dogs. So he could teach the dogs to heel and things like that, train the dogs. Then after his last dog, who he always names his pet after a palindrome, after his last dog, Peep, died, he decided, well, I'm 50-something. I'm going to give myself a little while of a break of pets, because I've had pets all my life. And he said, but one day he was just compelled for some reason to go to the pet park, just to walk around and watch people with their pets. And he goes on this pet walking trail, and something just kind of compelled him to veer off the path. And he found the cat, and it's a Sphinx cat, in a clear takeout box that someone had shoved it in as a kitten and put it on a rock in the boiling sun to leave it there to die. And the thing was sunburned and almost dead. And he rushed the kitty to the emergencies vet and was able to pull her through with a great deal of suffering. A kitten that sunburned and dehydrated, when getting very little oxygen because some sadist decided to seal it up in a container. And then Graham, need to quit getting people mixed up, says this once he finishes telling his story, if I can find it. Gemma was openly weeping at that point, so much for not wanting to cry, she said. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. I just wanted you to know you don't want to see such violence, you don't. Hannah and I are rescue connected, just like Sebastian and Harlow are connected the same. She had to see him being beaten and see him through the sickness and suffering. That's why they have their intimacy. And Gemma says, you're right, I would have fallen apart. I couldn't have dealt with it. And she couldn't have. And then Graham says, He once told me he loved you from the first moment he saw you when you two sat through long division class together. And she said, I was 10 and he was 12. It was remedial math for him. He passed because he copied my homework and I slipped him the answers to the tests. Lifers. Anyway, I think Graham deserves more page time, so I'm going to write a short story about him coming up. And after I've read this book for myself 3 times since it's been published, I've come to the conclusion that Graham is a ward of his older sister. So I've got to ponder, why aren't the parents in the picture? Maybe they died of the condition. Could be. Anyway, this is a different kind of drink. It's rose and jasmine gin, and I put some lavender syrup in it and some plain club soda water. I'm one of those people that would, if I could subsist off eating edible flowers, I would do it. I remember I had a friend that back in the day, back when I was in high school, we had a neighborhood friend. His name was Jeff Lee, and unfortunately he's since passed from a motorcycle accident years ago. But he was, I could get in this whole thing about the Christian bully in my school. I'll be getting way too long of the video and digressing too much. But he was only one of the people in my neighborhood targeted by this asshole named Jay Barker, who claimed to be Christian. And the reason he was targeted is because Jeff Ling liked to wear dresses. Fine. If you're a man, you want to wear dresses? Teenager, you want to wear dresses? What's the issue? I don't understand this whole thing about scary, scary trans, but I'm not trying to politicize this too much. But I would grow flowers. Some of them were edible, and I used like the pesticide-free to keep the bugs away, so you could actually eat the pansies. So I remember we were standing out front of the house one day eating pansies, and he's in his dress, and these people just decide to pull over and start just harassing us to no end. And unfortunately now, it's not just that you can get bullied in front of your house or at school. Now the kids have to get bullied online as well. Anti-bullying, another message of my book. I'm going to make one more video this year, and it's going to be on Christmas Eve, and I'm going to talk about how I had to overcome my hate of Christmas and why I hated it in the first place. Anyway, if anybody stuck around to almost 20 minutes, I really appreciate it. Have a good day.